Hello again, this is Jonathan Eder at the piano lesson, and today I'm going to talk about the wonderful world behind the secrets of the diminished scale. Ooh. You know, one of the things I like to do on this channel is not just discuss what to learn, but how to learn something and why to learn something. My idea of learning, and particularly my idea of jazz, and improvisation, is to take a simple idea and look at it in more than one way, from more than one vantage point. That's where you learn the most. You get let's call that a holistic or a holographic view of what we're looking at, what we're dealing with. It involves what we call mental plasticity, the ability to look at something in more than one way. And it not only makes it more fun and more useful, but also typically when we learn things, we all learn a little differently. And we sometimes we have strengths and weaknesses in how we learn and depending on what we're learning at any given time. But if you have more than one tool to help you learn something, it gives you a foothold into what you're learning. And then you can take your time making it become second nature and looking at other aspects of it. But one of the most fascinating concepts in music, I think, is this idea of a diminished scale. And I first actually became acquainted with it when I was taking a lesson with the great Joanne Brackeen. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the name Joanne Brackeen, you can look it up on the web. She's one of the great jazz pianists of our generation, and maybe any generation. But the first lesson that I took from her, she immediately listened to my playing and gave me an exercise of this lick using a diminished scale. I won't go quite into the specifics of that at the moment. And I had studied quite a bit before then and taken a lot of lessons, and I knew what I thought was a fair amount. I'd never really incorporated the sound, and I guess she kind of spotted that in my playing and said, "Aha, that's your weakness, and you should really spend some time with this area." I looked at it almost like a musical Rubik's Cube, and I've never done a Rubik's Cube. I'm actually not a big puzzle person, but taking this thing and looking at it in a whole variety of ways. And when I first tried to learn it in the conventional sense, learning in a very linear way, note by note by note by note by note, and then interval by interval by interval, I just found that too unwieldy. And what I came to embrace over the years, after trying many different things, was the concept of the tetrachord. And people know that I'm a big fan of the tetrachord. And a tetrachord, if you haven't become acquainted with that, is simply a group of four notes. And typically the tetrachord that we deal with is bound by a perfect fourth, and typically they're kind of glued together. They don't share notes. They're what we call disjunct tetrachords. And but there's another kind that we never kind of discuss, nobody ever really discusses, and this is the diminished fourth, okay, bound by a diminished fourth. That's useful for understanding the diminished scale from a different vantage point. And typically we talk about two types of diminished scales. We talk about there being a whole half, so starting with a whole step and then a half step and so on, or starting with a half whole, okay? And this is where this diminished fourth is very useful. Now, let me just backtrack and say that there are basically there's a hierarchy of intervals. So first you have perfect intervals, right? And those are fourths, fifths, and octaves, and sometimes unisons. And then after that, we have major intervals. And those come under the rubric of diatonic intervals. And then we have, over in another group, we have chromatic intervals, okay? And anytime you have a perfect interval and you lower it a half step, it becomes diminished. That's the definition of diminished, okay? And then if you have a major interval and you lower it a half step, it is not diminished, it is minor. But if you lower it again, it becomes diminished. That is the hierarchy of the nomenclature, of the vocabulary of music. All right, let me jump right in, but why would you want to know the diminished scale? Well, because first of all, you want to know music. You want to be able to, knowing this diminished concepts are really an acid test for understanding, clearly understanding how music works. Because if you want to play any piece of music, particularly if you want to play, like say, a piece of Chopin, which has lots of double sharps and double flats and all kinds of things and confuse people, you can't understand music by understanding notes. You have to understand music by understanding relationships of those notes and context. Or it's all about context and relationships. So just as a quick what's in it for you type thing, if you're a jazz player, let's say, and you want some sound, you want a cool lick over a chord, like a dominant 7 chords. You got your C7, your dominant 7 chord, right? And then here is the sound. Yeah. That's the C7, but it also has D sharp and D flat and D sharp, depending on how you spell it. Spelling's a little bit of an issue. I don't want to get too persnickety about that today, but let's just say that's the flat 9 and the sharp 9, and that's the flat 5. That's the 13, flat 5, 13, and that's the dominance. All right, I'll give you guys a bird's eye view of that. That's the sound, kind of this cluster of notes. All right, if you can learn notes, learn music, and music is a language. If you can learn it in these little packets of information, it'll make it manageable and it'll make it meaningful. I always talk about that, making things manageable and meaningful. All right, so more than that group of notes, it's too many. Less than that, it's too few. Okay, and I'm just going to write that out for a second here to see what that might look like. Okay, so treble clef, and let's just say, again, it's labeling these things might be a little difficult. I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna do an A. I'm gonna do yeah. I think I'll do that. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll do that. It's a little easier spelling, maybe. Okay, and then let's go. Right. So here's A, B flat, C, D flat. Right. That is from C. From A up to D flat. That constitutes a diminished fourth. Oh, sorry about that. Diminished fourth. Right. So A to D is a perfect fourth, and that's a diminished fourth, and that's how you notate it probably. And then the remaining notes, A, B flat, C, D flat. Then you have E flat, F flat, and then we'll say F sharp, and then G. Okay, it would really be E flat, F flat, G flat, A double flat is really what it would be. Or so let's spell it a little differently. Let's go D sharp E, F sharp G. Let's do that. That's a simpler spelling. D sharp E, F sharp, and G. Okay. And that's also your diminished tetrachord group. This little right. And the highest note is D flat. This is D sharp. I mean, we're gonna call that a whole step among friends. You know, that's a whole step apart. Those are disjunct, diminished tetrachords. All right. Here's your dominant chord. that's something that people never learn. And it may seem wonky, but I guarantee you that that little package of information is really important to know. Now, I'm going to show you some other ways to look at that scale. For instance, you could take that same scale, you could take an A diminished chord. Okay? So, A diminished, A, B, A, B flat. I'm sorry, I'm going to write the chord. A, C, E flat, and a G flat. Right. Notice they're all thirds, okay? And then we take another chord on top of that, okay? And let's just call that A sharp, okay? C sharp, E, and G. All right. A sharp, C sharp, E, G, and A, C, E flat, and G flat. Right. Here's the first chord. Here's the second chord. I'm gonna take this chord and put it on top of this, and you get the same scale. If I go left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and then I play the A at the end, that's the exact same sound as the conjunct diminished tetrachords. So, two ways to think of it, okay? As two diminished seventh chords that are kind of interlaced over the top of one another. That's viable. Or thinking of it as two packages of diminished fourths. Now, you could think of it just in a very linear way. You could just say half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole. That's possible too, but after a while, it's easy to kind of lose track. I mean, it's not my favorite way of learning those things. And particularly because we can take these packages of information and mix and kind of mix and match them later on to make other scales. But if also, another thing to think about, the diminished chord, of course, the diminished seventh chord, has 4 notes, right? I could create, there's the diminished tetrachord right there, right? Starting on the A, or I could do one starting on the C, or I could do one starting on the E flat, or I could do one starting on the G. Did I do that right? Yep. Right. So, and the G flat rather. That's the one I meant. Right. So this 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Did you guys follow that? That's a little different. We're taking these diminished tetrachord groups and we are overlapping them in a sense. Okay, those are called conjunct because they share notes. Okay, not disjunct, but conjunct notes. So A, B flat, C, D flat, and C, D flat, E flat, F flat, let's say. Those two groups of notes, those two tetrachord groups, right? They share C and D sharp. See? So they share those. Same with here. See these two notes. And likewise, these notes. All right. So you could conceive of the diminished scale as 4 conjunct diminished tetrachords that share tones, that share two notes. Now, again, we're talking about a scale that officially, all right, we're thinking from low to high, okay? So that's why we call it a half whole. And typically, if you see a dominant 7 chord, like A7, so you think of 2, A minor 7, A flat 7, D flat major 7, to the major 7, D major. I ended on the A. I'll show you what that looks like. It's a nice dissonance, and then a resolution. That's pretty neat. Now, here's another way to look at that same scale. Very interesting. You can extract out some notes to take the notes of that scale and make a chord. What chord would it be? Well, here's, let's see. Here's A7, and here's A7 flat 5. A7 flat 5. I want you to notice something, that tritone right there, okay? You can make a dominant 7 flat 5 chord on the root of the scale A and a dominant 7 flat 5 chord on the tritone of the scale. And all of those notes, if you take these notes, they are in, let's see, wait a minute. I'm gonna make sure I'm telling you the right thing. Yeah, this chord is precisely the same as this chord. It's just an inversion. See that? Exact same thing. And now, if I go up a half step, those notes, if I kind of interdisperse them in there, I will get the I'm trying. Sorry about this, guys. Getting a little ahead of myself here. Yeah, I wanted to show you how those notes, right, are, these are the same, okay, and yeah, I think you get my point. So you could take that chord, let's just say that and build that chord on every note of the diminished chord. Two concepts of harmonies. So here's your A7 flat 5, C, C7 flat 5, E flat 7 flat 5, G flat, G flat 7 flat 5, and it sounds like this. So you may have heard guys do stuff like that, or you can do 13 chords, A13 or A13, C13, G flat 13. Yeah, let me do that again. A flat 13, A13, C13, E flat 13, G flat 13. Let me show you what that looks like. So we're using this diminished chord as a framework as the roots for the rootless 13 chord. So again, just kind of stretching the boundaries of that diminished sound. I remember what I wanted to show you now. Let me go back to the A chord there. That A7 flat 5, all right? If I go up 6 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I play G flat, 7 flat 5, this group of notes, okay? If I take all of these notes and put them together with all of these notes, right, I will get that half-whole diminished scale. So that's the first tetrachord group, right? I have the B flat up here and the C right there. So 2 of those notes that I need, right, are right there. And then the other tetrachord group, right? I have the E flat already. I have the E up here and the G flat, and then the, right? If you notice, so that's another way to arrive at the sound of that whole half scale really fast. The thing I was showing you earlier, I just didn't quite have the chord relationship quite right, but if you go up a sixth or down a minor third, think relative minor, and take a minor 7 flat 5 chord, 4 notes, you'll combine them, you get the diminished scale. May seem again a bit wonky, but again, this is all in the interest of taking a simple idea and being able to think of them in more than one way. I mean, that's what it means to be an improviser. That's what it means to be a composer. That's what it means to also be a competent performer, because in real life, things don't go to plan. You know, anything and everything can happen during a performance, including just plain old nerves, right? So when you study something, you really want to study it forwards and backwards and left and right and up. So when you're studying this sound, also just taking diminished chords and building diminished chords on every single note of that. I took every note of this scale and I just played a diminished 7th chord right on top of that. That's harmonizing the scale. And really, as a pianist, that's really what you want to be able to do. You don't want to just play single notes all the time. There's so much more to the piano than just playing single notes. Okay. Again, the thing I wanted to show you is the A7 flat 5 is the same as the E7 flat 5, and the G flat or F sharp flat 5 is exactly the same as the C7, as the C7 flat 5. Precisely the same. Right? Here's the F sharp 7 flat 5. If I take these 2 notes and I bring them up here, now I got C7 flat 5. So A7 flat 5, I bring these 2 notes up, I have the E7 flat 5. So combining this chord with either this or this, and combining, it's all the same group of notes, is my point. It's just, we're just talking semantics. We're just talking labels now, okay? but it's all from the same pot. It's all from the same group. So when you're playing, and you can just sort of throw your hands on the keyboard and get sounds in the heat of battle. So what am I doing? This is A7 flat 5, E flat 7 flat 5, G flat 7 flat 5, C7 flat 5. And if you notice, the notes that I'm playing are all notes of the diminished chord: A, C, E flat, G flat, or F sharp. They're all the same notes. They're all derived from that pool of notes. So learning a scale, just learning a scale in a linear way, like we all do, like our major scales, we go up and down. That's a nice first start. But if that's all you do, it will trap you into thinking in a very one-dimensional, or two-dimensional way, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering why your playing hasn't grown. And this is why. This is why certain players, certain improvisers, certain composers have this incredible palette of sound that we all gravitate towards, and other composers just fall flat. And part of it is just developing an ethic, a work ethic, to step up to the plate and do the work that's required to explore some of these sounds. So I covered a lot of ground. I made a few little faux pas along the way. I hope you'll forgive me. Even I make mistakes. But please write me if you have questions. And that's pretty much what I'm going to cover today. So you guys have a great week. This is Jonathan Eder and the piano lesson. And if you need any assistance on a personal basis, also please contact me. Okay, take care and good luck.